Tim Ryan has been a relentless advocate for Ohio's working families. He was first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2002 and has won re-election 9 times. Tim serves as co-chairman of the Congressional Manufacturing Caucus and remains a leader in the fight to strengthen America's manufacturing base and reform U.S. trade policies. Tim's primary focus remains on the economy and quality of life for all Ohioans. He works closely with local officials and community leaders to advance local projects that enhance economic competitiveness and help attract high-quality, high-paying jobs. He's a dynamic leader in the House and speaks out on issues of particular concern in his Northeast Ohio district, including ways to make college more affordable, revitalize America's cities, and improve the health and well-being of America's families and children. He's also an author, having written Healing America, How a Simple Practice Can Help Us Recapture the American Spirit, and The Real Food Revolution, Healthy Eating, Green Groceries, and the Return of the American Family Farm. Most importantly for us at this RA, Tim has been a fearless fighter for public education, our students and our members. He's fought side by side with many of you on collective bargaining, including walking picket lines. He's fought for us on fair funding, and he understands the critical role public education plays in all of our lives. Year after year, Tim has earned an A rating from NEA for his advocacy on our issues. In fact, he understands the critical role public education plays in all our lives so much, he ended up marrying an educator. Is there any question why our members overwhelmingly recommended OEA and NEA endorse him for the United States Senate? Ladies and gentlemen, the next senator from the state of Ohio, Congressman Tim Ryan.
All right. Thank you, brother. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much, Scott. It's great to be here talking to hundreds of educators across the state, not just our teachers, but the custodians, the bus drivers, all of the support personnel. And as Scott mentioned, my wife, Andrea, has been an elementary school teacher, 4th grade, 1st grade, for almost 20 years. And all the visits to go see her, constantly reminded of the team that's in place really to educate our kids. And when you look at the landscape today of the level of competition that our kids are going into, global competition, it becomes apparent, as we have these elections from time to time, every couple of years, Senate races every 6 years. The American people are always asked to look at the moment that we're living in and make decisions as to what direction the country should go in and who should they represent and send to Washington to represent them. And in this moment that we're in right now, we are in a very, very stiff competition. There's so many issues, but we are in a stiff competition primarily with the country of China. And we are a country of only 330 million people. And we are competing more directly, and the kids that you're educating every day are going to compete more directly with the 1.4 billion people that live in that country. And I believe that they know and they understand that they are in an economic war with the United States. And I don't believe that the United States understands the kind of actions that are being taken by China to try to displace American businesses, American workers. And nobody knows better than citizens of Ohio the job loss, the trade deals, the income inequality, globalization, automation. You could go to almost any community in Ohio and see how it has been ravaged by horrible economic policies that I just mentioned. And what's happened is this huge concentration of wealth. In the 1970s, CEO pay, since the 1970s, CEO pay has gone up 1,300%. 1,300%. And the average wage for workers has gone up about 18%. And so that disparity is something that we have to begin to close. And it happens by doing three things. And I think these three things are the basic principles of us moving forward. Is we have to build America, we have to rebuild the middle class, and we have to beat China. And what does that mean for the educators? It means, from a policy perspective, we have to invest into you, your schools, your community. We have to make sure that our kids have the skills necessary to outcompete China. We got to rebuild our country with this infrastructure bill. And I've talked to so many people across this state, many of them teachers and educators, where kids are having to go to a church or to a McDonald's to download their homework because they don't have access to high-quality internet. That is insane. That is insane. To think that we're going to outcompete China when our businesses and our schools don't have access to these kind of things. We need to make sure that we are performing and able to compete at a level that will allow us to take on China. They outproduce us with semiconductors, electric vehicles, batteries, charging stations, artificial intelligence, pharmaceuticals. Most of the pharmaceutical compounds we get in the United States come from China. And we're running, us collectively, are running against people on the Republican primary that are saying that we need to get rid of public education. One of the candidates, so extreme, says we need to get rid of public education and put our schools in churches and synagogues. The greatest strength we've ever had in the United States, our most powerful weapon in the United States, was the great American middle class. And I believe that the judgment that needs to be made by voters today in Ohio and across the country is who will be the candidate that will go to Washington, D.C., go to the most powerful legislative body in the world, and do everything in their power to rebuild the United States middle class. Because it has been gutted, it has eroded, and it's time for us to move in another direction. I'm going to fight like hell for you. I grew up in Niles, just outside of Youngstown. As we said, my wife is a first grade school teacher in Mineral Ridge, Ohio. Our kids go to Howland and Mineral Ridge. Our oldest goes to Ohio State Mansfield campus. We are Ohio. I went to Bowling Green. I worked here in Columbus in the state Senate, grew up in the Valley. I understand what's happening in this state and in this country. And I've been fighting my rear end off for working people, whether they're white or black or brown, for 20 years. And I want to take that fight for you and your community and your school to the United States Senate. We cannot put somebody in office who wants to dismantle and attack public education. I'll just say lastly, every time I pull into Columbus, Ohio, get up early and outside of Warren and drive down, and I pull in, I always remember the fight for Senate Bill 5. Coming down here as a young congressman and being with you in that fight, being with police and fire and all of the other public employees. We won that by 63% of the vote. When you run on an economic message, a pocketbook message with working class people, and we come together around these economic issues, we move the needle. And that's what's going to happen in this campaign. And you're going to send a Democrat, a fighter from the Mahoning Valley, to stand shoulder to shoulder with Senator Sherrod Brown. Look forward to the campaign over the next year. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Tim. So let's continue the discussion. I want to make sure that this is on. I think they are. Yes, we are good. I'm glad you mentioned Senate Bill 5.
Yours is taller than me. Did you set that up, Lane?
How
did that happen?
It's funny that we had this discussion yesterday, and I specifically asked that we do the John Lovitz
Just
thing.
like 2-3 inches.
I know because if we were standing, you would be about probably 12 inches taller than me. So anyway, we're
Great to
trying
see
to do
you.
that.
Always
No,
good to be with you.
and first off, you said you were fighting as a young congressman back then. Of course, you're still a young congressman.
Well,
so I just
considering the age of everyone else in Washington, I'm young. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So, can you talk a little bit? one of the things that we're really excited about, and one thing that we appreciate your advocacy on, was getting the American Rescue Plan Act passed. That's bringing $4.5 billion in desperately needed federal resources into our school system in the state of Ohio. And since then, President Biden signed the bipartisan infrastructure bill.
Yep.
And we're hoping that following your lead, we'll get the Build Back Better plan passed. Can you talk a little bit for our delegates, like what those issues mean? Like why the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better plan are so important?
Yeah, I think it's important for you guys and for us to really paint the picture of like, look, there are two different visions of what Washington, D.C. is supposed to do for the country, right? And there's the guys like me and guys like Sherrod who are saying, like, look, government needs to be on your side, needs to make investments, and there's others who want to dismantle public education and all the rest. And so the rescue package was really an opportunity for us to go all in on schools, all in on local governments who have been gutted as well over the last however many years. We see it with the local government fund here in Ohio, the child tax credit, which is lifting millions of kids out of poverty across the United States. I mean, finally, a tax cut for working families. We know how expenses are going up, and so it's important to do that. And now coming in with the infrastructure bill, again, the broadband, the roads, the bridge is going to create millions of jobs, union construction jobs across the country. And we're trying to lay the groundwork for the next generation of jobs. I mentioned, China, like they dominate 52% of the electric vehicle industry. They dominate us in batteries and in a lot of other technologies. We can't even begin to compete with them until we lay this infrastructure down, and there's money in there for schools. And so we've got to start, I think, respecting what teachers do. Just a quick funny story, during the middle of the pandemic, I know so many teachers have been through a lot. My wife got an email from a parent who said, you guys don't get paid enough. This is like in the heat of it, right? You guys don't get paid enough. People don't respect teachers enough. In fact, I may have given, she's homeschooling the kid, she goes, I may have given birth to this kid, but he's actually yours, and you need to come and get him. So that's the investment we want to make.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of our members, we're hearing things like that. So we've got that issue. I know there are a couple of things that specific to education. One is, this charter school industry, and wondering if you're elected to the Senate. I should say when you are elected to the Senate.
Manifest that stuff.
How you're going to take that on. Because one startling statistic is 37% of charter school startups in the state of Ohio that have received federal funding have closed within the first year or two. And that, talk about throwing money down the drain when we really need to be committed to our public schools. So can you talk a little bit about your approach to that whole issue of accountability for charter schools and the whole privatization movement?
Well, clearly informed. I only spent 2 years in the Ohio Senate, and obviously a representative from Ohio. My views are informed by the dumpster fire that is happening here in Ohio. I mean, even the charter school community calls Ohio the wild, wild west of charter schools because it's complete lack of oversight. And so I've been calling on for years now the Department of Education to pay more attention, to provide some oversight. I think the Biden administration is moving in that direction. And you just got to put the hammer down. It's like, look, it is what it is now, but it needs to be regulated at the same way that the public schools are, because it's just otherwise it's unfair, and there's no way to really gauge whether or not these kids are getting the education. And again, think about the lost years there. You go to a charter school that doesn't even make it the next year. Now, is that kid prepared to go to the public school and be able to keep up with his peers who got the education in the public school the last year? So again, we're trying to compete against China. This is a very serious competition, which is why we have to make sure we regulate these things even at the federal level.
Yeah, thanks. So one of the things that's on our members' minds all the time is just the way standardized testing has far too often just sucked the joy out of teaching and learning from our classrooms. And a lot of the standardized testing pressures, come from the federal government. They came from No Child Left Behind, and while we got some improvements in ESSA, there are still lots of minimum testing requirements that the federal government imposes on states. How are you going to take on the issue of standardized testing in the Senate?
Well, I think continue to work with the Biden administration. I know they're already taking steps to try to streamline and reduce. And look, we want to make sure we know where the kids are, so we can then adjust one way or the other. But the obsession is, as you said, it's taken the joy out of teaching. It's taken the joy out of learning. How many people and how many students are really good students, but not necessarily great test takers? The direct correlation between the economic situation in a community and in a school district is directly related, and that study years ago came out of Youngstown State University, directly connected to the performance with test scores. So this obsession, look, teaching is an art. I see it at home. Because my wife will periodically follow me around with a red pen, if I'm not doing everything right. But it's an art form, and it needs to be appreciated that way. And again, it's not just the test scores. We've got to make sure we're monitoring the kids, but it's got to be within reason. And we've got to, I think, build out a lot of things that we got rid of. We got rid of shop class. We got rid of home economics. We're not investing into the after-school and summer school programs like we should. We still have buildings that aren't up to speed, even with all the building and construction that's been going on here. So it's a broader thing. But if we move away from our obsession of testing and recognize that some kid may enter an understanding of math through music or through art. So why have we limited these? Every kid's different. And I just think that's a general philosophy. Everyone's a genius, right? Every kid is a genius in some way. Some can take a car apart and put it back together. I couldn't. Maybe I'm good in speech and debate, and someone else is good at something else. But we've narrowed the entry points for those kids to find that genius, to find that passion. And, once you find it, everything else opens up. Then you understand why you have to learn these other things. You know what I mean? Our oldest son is really getting into stocks and cryptocurrency and just it's so neat to watch him. He just lights up, right? He never had this exposure, but now he's understanding why he really needs to understand how to write a good paper, because I'm telling him, look, if you want to understand this, you're going to have a boss who's going to say, send me an email explaining all of this. Right. But his passion, his entry point was investment in finance and stocks. We got to offer that to our kids across the board. But it's been the obsession with testing that has narrowed that. And I think it's hurt us, and I think it's hurt our economy.
Yeah. So you mentioned in your opening comments, that our union represents a diverse array of adults who work in schools, higher education, K-12, working for county boards, and teachers and education support professionals, people who drive the buses and work in our cafeterias and serve as school secretaries and paraprofessionals. One of the things that we're really facing right now is a shortage of people in all of those areas. You hear every day about the stories of schools that can't operate for in-person instruction because of a critical bus driver shortage. What are some things that can be done at the federal level to address those kinds of issues and to make sure that the people who are working in our schools in all those different roles have the support that they need?
Well, I think the union issue, making sure these jobs pay, that they're getting a fair wage, good retirement, and all the rest, which you guys are phenomenal at. In the rescue package, we sent a lot of money to the local school districts, and we're hoping here in Ohio that bumps the level up. And then with your efforts and our efforts to try to increase the investments, we can keep that going, whatever those investments are made by the rescue package. So part of it is that. The other part is we got to stand up for our public schools. We can't be silent on what this BS, I'm trying to be polite here on Saturday morning, that we've seen over this past several months of just setting up a camera at a school board meeting and having someone sign you in, and a politician goes in there that has no other interest in that school district other than demagoguing whatever particular issue or on mass or whatever. We got to call people out on that. It's look, these are complicated decisions. Parents are anxious. Teachers are anxious. Right. This last year and a half sucked. 2 years. It's been terrible for everybody. So instead of coming together and how do we fix this, we've got to call those people out. I think that's going to be equally as important. You're seeing it across professions, most in the public sector, of people saying, I'm not going to go into teaching. I'm going to go expose myself to this craziness and parents and the way you've heard me tell this story. Like, my grandfather was a steel worker, and one time I was taking him grocery shopping, and I wanted to go to this one grocery store, and he wouldn't go there because the meat cutters were on strike, and he wouldn't cross the picket line. Now, I was a young person at that point, but he was teaching me, like, you respect those workers.
Yeah.
And I think if there's something that we've really lost, it's that just general respect that this teacher gets up, this educator, this cafeteria worker, this bus driver, they get up every morning to take care of our kids. They spend more time with our kids than we do, given the nature of our economy, and we're going to dump all over them. Like, I think that is the fundamental problem, man. And then, of course, the wage and other things that I mentioned. And that's a culture thing that we all have to participate in.
Yeah, so you alluded to one of your opponent's comments, and I'm going to call him out, Josh Mandel,
Yeah.
who has been so brazen in his disdain for public education. That comment about get rid of public schools and go to churches and synagogues. But it's not just him.
Yeah.
J.D. Vance, in the same debate at the same time, to your point, was dissing on teachers, attacking our union, implying that because we're not parents, which of course many of us are, your wife, myself, but the suggestion that somehow you can't trust these people in our schools, and just the utter disrespect coming from him. And then you had other people in that primary who were spending, and they're all millionaires, and they're spending all this money to fund these openly anti-union, anti-public education candidates for local school boards. Most of them were unsuccessful, which we were happy about.
Yeah, it's great to hear.
But how do you take that on? I mean, it seems that the political rhetoric has gone so far off the rails, gotten so far removed from reality, so driven by social media disinformation. How do you cut through all the noise? How are you going to be successful, not just winning the election in November, but beyond that?
I think you got to call them out, because I was so heartened to hear what you were saying about the polling that you guys have done and the success in the elections. I just think, like, sometimes Democrats are like, well, I don't know. I mean, I may hurt somebody's feelings if I say X, Y. No, this is wrong what they're doing. I mean, there's right and there's wrong, and what they're doing is wrong, and it's disrespectful. It's insulting to people who are, again, going out every day to show up to serve the public, to serve our kids. And I think you got to call them out on that at every single turn, because I think the vast majority of people in the state respect, as your polling indicated, the fact that these folks that you represent in the union go out every day to help. And I tell people all the time, it's like, the big lie in the United States, we think the big lie is like on the election, but the big lie in the country is, if I disagree with you on something, I have to hate you. I have to go to a school board meeting and demean you. I have to vanquish you, right? That's the big lie in the country right now. And I tell people all the time that, you're not going to agree with your senator or your congressman 100% of the time. And I asked jokingly, is anybody married here? And people laugh. And I said, look, if my wife and I have 10 conversations in a day and we completely agree on 7 of them, that's a hell of a day. I'm like, we open up a bottle of wine and celebrate how great our marriage is, right? But you're never going to agree 100% of the time with your spouse. Why in God's name would you agree 100% of the time with your senator? So to somehow go to the next level and demean and insult, I think the country's tired of that. And they're looking for leaders who can say, look, we can have an honest disagreement about a lot of different things. You want to find something to disagree with? Guess what? We can find something to disagree on. There's plenty of stuff out there. I want this campaign to be about what are our common interests? What's the common good? And I think our literature of our country is sprinkled with words and phrases that talk about the common good, the general welfare, provide for the common defense. Our country was founded on, look, what do we do together here?
Yeah.
You know, we know we're going to have our differences. And when you look at our competition with China, you look at our infrastructure, you look at our kids' education, especially in the public schools. This is all common. This is all stuff we got to figure out. There's no getting out of this, right? Maybe if you're rich, and I think that's why you have a bunch of millionaires. And I'll just say this. Does anybody really think that the solution to our country's problems is to put another millionaire in the United States Senate, right? To me, you get a kid from the Mahoning Valley, or you want another millionaire. Like, who's going to balance this thing out a little bit better? And I think that's me.
Well, Tim, we appreciate
Thanks, man.
your fight. We
Yeah.
appreciate you really the fact that you drove down from Youngstown, from Niles,
Yeah.
to be with us today. We're going to be doing a little get together a little bit later to show our support for you and
Appreciate it.
give you a chance to meet some of our members. But
Love it.
But so glad
Thanks, man.
to have you with us.
Yeah.
My friends, he needs our help.
Yes.
We need to do all we can in the next 11 months to make sure that Tim Ryan is indeed the next senator from Ohio.
Yeah.
Thank you for all you do.
We're building an army. We need
All right.
everybody. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you.